The rain pounded relentlessly against the windows of Detective Sarah Lawson's office, a steady drumbeat in the heart of the city. She sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the one case that had kept her awake for days, the murder of real estate tycoon Robert Huntley. The scene of the crime had been eerily clean, too clean. There were no fingerprints, no signs of a struggle, just Robert's lifeless body slumped over his desk with a bullet in his chest. The only witness to his death? His wife, Emily. Emily's story had never changed. She was downstairs when she heard the gunshot. By the time she reached Robert's office, it was already too late. Sarah had interviewed Emily multiple times, but something about her calm demeanor gnawed at her. Something didn't add up. Then, just as Sarah began to question her instincts, her phone rang. It was Emily. She wanted to confess. Later that night, Sarah sat across from Emily in the cold, dimly lit interrogation room. Emily's hands shook as she clasped them together, her face pale and eyes hollow. "I can't do this anymore," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I have to tell you the truth." Sarah leaned in closer, her pulse quickening. "Go on." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "Robert wasn't the man everyone thought he was. He controlled every part of my life. He was cruel, manipulative, and for years I was trapped. But then I met Greg." "Greg?" Sarah's voice was calm, but inside she could feel the tension rising. Robert's business partner, Greg, had been under their radar since the beginning, but there had been no hard evidence against him, until now. "We started seeing each other," Emily continued, her voice trembling. "He made me feel alive again, and Robert found out. That's when everything changed. Robert threatened to ruin both of us." Sarah's mind raced as Emily continued. "The night Robert was killed, Greg came over to confront him. I tried to stop him, but when I got there," she paused, tears streaming down her face. "Robert was already dead. Greg was standing over him with the gun." Emily broke down, sobbing. "We panicked. We wiped everything clean. I didn't know what else to do. We had to cover it up." Sarah watched Emily closely. She'd seen confessions before, but something felt off. Why would Emily turn on Greg now? And why come forward at all if they had gotten away with it? The next morning, Sarah and her partner, Detective Mark, arrived at Greg's apartment. It was a quiet place, nestled in a nondescript building on the edge of the city. Greg opened the door, his eyes bloodshot and his face gaunt. He seemed on edge, like he hadn't slept in days. "Greg," Sarah began, stepping inside, "we need to talk about Robert." Greg's eyes darted nervously. "I didn't kill him." Sarah crossed her arms, her voice steady. "Emily says otherwise." Greg's face twisted in anger. "She's lying! She's trying to pin this on me." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Why would she do that?" Greg's voice grew frantic. "Because it was her idea all along. Robert never knew about us. She wanted him gone. She said it was the only way we could be together. I told her no, but that night, she called me, said it was done." Sarah's heart pounded as Greg's words sank in. "When I got to the house," Greg continued, his voice cracking, "Robert was already dead, and Emily, she was holding the gun." Back at the station, Sarah felt the weight of the case pressing down on her. Two confessions, each accusing the other. Someone was lying. She decided to set a trap. That evening she brought both Greg and Emily into separate rooms and interrogated them for hours. Neither budged, both insisting the other was the killer. The tension was thick, and Sarah could feel the pressure mounting. Finally, as the clock ticked past midnight, Sarah had an idea. She walked into Emily's room and placed a small, clear plastic bag on the table in front of her. Inside was a wedding ring. "We found this behind Robert's desk," Sarah said softly. "Your ring. It must have slipped off when you were cleaning up the crime scene." Emily's face drained of color. "You missed it, didn't you?" Sarah whispered. "You thought you had everything covered. But this is the mistake that's going to take you down." Emily's lip quivered. She stared at the ring, her hands trembling violently. And then, as if the weight of her secret crushed her at once, she broke. "I didn't want to do it," she sobbed. "I had no choice. Robert would never let me leave. He would have destroyed me." "So, you killed him?" Sarah asked quietly. "I had to," Emily cried. "Greg didn't know. I needed Robert gone." With Emily's confession on tape, Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was finally over. Emily Huntley had killed her husband to escape his control. Greg had been a pawn in her game. Later that night, as Sarah sat in her car, exhausted from the long day, her phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at the screen, her eyes narrowing in confusion. The message was from Greg. "Thanks for keeping your end of the deal. Drinks later?" For a moment Sarah's world seemed to stop. She stared at the message, her mind racing. It couldn't be. She had played them both against each other. But now it was clear. Greg hadn't been an innocent bystander after all. He and Sarah had made a deal. He knew about Robert's murder. They had both wanted to take Emily down, and Sarah had helped him pull it off. She deleted the message, her face cold and unreadable. With the flick of a finger, she erased the evidence of her involvement. As the rain continued to pour outside, Sarah drove off into the night, leaving behind a web of lies, betrayal, and murder.